Kia ora koutou, ko Tiffany taku ingoa, he kairuruku tau whainga a hau ki Manaaki Whenua. Good morning everyone, my name is Tiffany and I am the Events Coordinator at Manaaki Whenua Land Care Research. A lot of you would have joined us previously for a webinar session, but before I hand over to Christine, I'm going to run through a couple of technical slides to ensure that your experience with us online today goes as smooth as possible. If you've heard this all before, you can ignore me for the next minute. You will notice you have a control panel at the side of your screen. If at any time this collapses, you can bring it back by simply clicking the orange arrow button. If you are having sound issues and you can see my mouth moving but cannot hear a word I'm saying, please grab the PDF in the handout section, and this has instructions to resolve this quickly. The audio panel is where you can control where the sound plays on your computer. Select the drop-down arrow and choose your audio output. During the presentation, you may have questions that you want to be covered in our Q&A session. You can do this via the chat panel throughout our session today. You will notice it is pretty small and it will be hard to read other attendees' questions. Select the pop-out icon on this panel and drag the corner out to make it as big as you want. You can also use this feature if you are having technical issues and ask me any questions. Questions asked by the audience show as anonymous and a green colour in the chat panel. However, please note we will use your name in the Q&A session. If I respond to you regarding a question, this will show as red. Now over to Christine to introduce you to our fourth LINKOnline session.
Kia ora and greetings from Wellington. Thank you for joining, as Tiffany said, the fourth of these LINKOnline webinars. And I know this is a topic that many of you are keen to hear more about. And the good news is that this is the first of two webinars on SMAP and associated soil science. I'm going to hand over shortly to Lilburne and Sam Carrick, who together lead the development of our soil science and the delivery of SMAP. After their 20-minute presentation, I'll come back on to help manage some of the questions. Don't forget to put your questions in as early as you can into the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. So thanks very much. Over to you, Linda and Sam.
Kia ora koutou. So today we're going to give you a reasonably short but hopefully insightful introduction to SMAP. It's hosted by me and Linda, but we just want to recognise first up that it's actually a wide range of staff from both Manaaki Whenua and other organisations who contribute towards SMAP. And so, yes, we'd like to thank their help. And yeah, we'll start into the presentation. So the talk will be done in two parts. I'll introduce the first part, and Linda's driving the slides. So if you see my pencil go up, that's my signal to Linda that we're swapping slides there. And yes, I'll do the first part, introduce SMAP, then Linda will actually delve into the modelling engine, which is kind of the heart of SMAP, I guess you'd call it, and some of the applications by which we've used that engine that we're currently doing at the moment. So an important thing to recognise for New Zealand is we're actually internationally recognised as both having a beautiful landscape, but having a quite high diversity of different types of soils. So here there's some examples from different parts of New Zealand. Up in Northland, you've got very old weathered clays. Central North Island dominated by volcanic material. If you drop down to the west coast, a lot of the soils there are highly leached under very high rainfalls. Go to the east coast over by Canterbury, there you've got stony outwash from all the glaciations in the southern Alps. Into central Otago, you have the opposite to the west coast, down to less than 350 millimetres rainfall in very soils. And then in other parts of New Zealand, you have a lot of wind blown dust, which is the loose downlands, so we can see down the bottom here. Those different soils, they not only do they vary greatly across the landscape, they actually vary quite significantly in how they respond to different types of pressure. So how we use the soils. In this case, you can see how two different soils are responding to wind grazing. Yeah. So the one on the left-hand side is what we kind of call it classic brown soil in New Zealand. Very draining, so those much yellow brown colours you can see in the subsoil there. And if you contrast that one to the right hand form in the same parent material, it's a climate formed a dense, what we call a dense fragipan, a subsoil pan, slightly from about centimetres.
Hi there, Sam. Can I just interrupt you briefly? We seem to be having some sound issues. Sam, do you have a headset on? Okay, so let's, I wonder if we can move to, if it doesn't disturb the flow too much, if we move to Linda's part of the presentation.
Or I just keep going.
Linda, or you
or
can if you can pick up from Sam, and we'll see if we can resolve the issues with the sound.
I'll carry on for a couple of slides. I'm not actually quite sure where he got to. I guess everyone else isn't either, if you all had the same problems in hearing that I did. But essentially, the soils vary a lot. Some soils will respond poorly, leach a lot, emit less, and others will be the other way around. And you can really see an example of this in some measured results of where effluent was poured onto two different soils, one of which you can see has got plenty of effluent still there, the other one cleansed it somewhat, and then the pumice soil completely cleaned out that dairy shed effluent. So the soil is really important for many things. The SMAP was started in 2004, the very early days of it, and even back then we had these clear goals in place for what we wanted to achieve. One was a comprehensive soil map for all of New Zealand. It needed to fit within the same common and consistent standards, which meant correlation across all of New Zealand. But it was also important that it wasn't static, that it evolved as we learned more about the soil and information science technology improves. We needed to be able to evolve with those changes. Quantitative information was really important. We know these models nowadays need quantitative information, not the more qualitative assessments of old. We needed requirements change. Users have different needs, and we need to be able to adapt and meet those. We're also trying to support decision making at all scales, the nation, but down to the farm scale where we can as well. And then a last sort of prime objective was that we do want to make it accessible to a wide range of users. SMAP isn't just Manaaki Whenua. Sam, are you able to talk now? Do you want to have another quick try? No, it seems like he's not responding. So it is a long-term collective effort. There are many partners who are behind SMAP.
Yeah.
Going back to the historical, the Taupo South, the Gorotago, these historical government regional growth programs, and there's the team there of the people who were involved in Taupo South, including Sam, in fact. We built on those soil survey projects, and since then the regional councils have come in and particularly supported that continuation of expanding that coverage of SMAP. MPI has been another key supporter. Fertiliser companies and Overseer are also key financial supporters of the SMAP. And then, of course, ourselves through our funding with MB. So really it is a partnership between all of these different groups and others as well. Sam, are you able to talk now? Do you want to try?
Yeah, does that work? Does that sound work for people now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Okay, yeah, sorry. So yeah, as Linda said, that the SMAP's been really driven as a collective from the early days, and so it's, as you can see, there's progress being made in different regions depending on the ability of different regional councils to contribute. So at this moment, 2020, we have covered around 35% of New Zealand, which is just over 8 million hectares, You can see on the right hand side of that slide there the parts of New Zealand where we have coverage. So you can see somewhere like Hawke's Bay, we have complete regional coverage. Somewhere like Taranaki, we have no coverage at this point. Other areas, Canterbury, Southland, Otago, Wellington, Waikato, Horizons, we have part coverage, and it's varying. It's important to recognise, though, that of that, even though we've covered 35%, just under half of the country is what we'd say class 7 to 8 land. So that's mountain lands or steep hill country. And that generally has a lower requirement for quality soil information. And so we've been prioritising our effort up to this point focused on the class 1 to 6 land, so the area where there's the most intensive agriculture. And we've covered around 50% of that so far. But within that kind of area that we have covered of New Zealand, you can see that first point I'd made about New Zealand having a high diversity of soils. We've found about 5,000 different soil types so far, so there's a great variety of soils out there. And a key thing to recognise for SMAP is it's not just a soil map. Traditionally, soil survey data was seen as a soil map, whereas now it's very much a soil information system. It's a kind of a partnership between soil science and informatics science. And at the bottom of it, underpinning this information system is all that is different data sets. You can see on the bottom there left, there's spatial soil maps, GIS layers. Then we're pulling in as well research on soil processes and management, but covered by different scientists. And then another data set we do draw on a lot is there are points in the landscape where we've dug pits and we've had direct laboratory measurements. And that gets all pulled together within the information generator, which Linda will talk about and cover in the second half of this presentation. But it's one thing to generate information and organise it and pull it together from different sources, but the key thing is getting that information to the right people in the right time and the right place. And so we've put a lot of investment and a lot of effort into our delivery mechanisms. And there's some various ones I've covered across the top there. There's SMAP Online, which I'll talk about in a second, which is most extensively used. We supply a lot of GIS layers to different people, and we also supply information directly into the more bespoke kind of systems of different agencies and businesses. And a major service we do is we supply information directly into the Overseer nutrient management tool. So these next slides I'll just go into and talk about SMAP Online. And so most of you hopefully have used SMAP Online. It's our main delivery platform, public good platform. It's free to access and provides all of our information to a range of people 24/7 on that sense. So if you look at the left-hand side there, you can enter in your address or coordinates or location. You could type in Masterton in that case, and it will take you to Masterton within New Zealand. You can likewise, down there's various buttons you can turn on and off to view different layers. In this case, we're viewing the profile available water holding capacity within SMAP. And when you zoom to an area there, you can click on a particular spot that you're interested in, and you'll bring up the soils that have been identified within there. In this case, you can see we've identified 3 different soils, and there's an estimate of the likely percentage within that area. So the top soil we're estimating is 50%, the other 2 soils are 20 and 15%. And we also provide an estimate of our confidence of that mapping. So how confident are we on the quality and the likelihood that those soils are there? If you click on the actual soil name itself, you can bring up a fact sheet which contains a lot of the information that we have around that soil, from classification through to physical properties through to information around land management. You can do some kind of analyses within SMAP. You can, in this case, use the LIN's land parcel layers, and you can select a land parcel or multiple land parcels that you're interested in, and then you can do some spatial analysis. In this case, clicked on a land parcel, and you can see there it's bringing up the number of hectares which have a low, a moderate to low, moderate water holding capacity, and likewise it tells you the percentage of different types of soils which are occurring within that land parcel. And you can download that information and export that as a report and to use in various tools. So one of the important things is that we really understand the type of users which are using the soil information, because it's one of our prime goals and objectives is to make sure it's accessible and that those people are getting the information that they want. And this is just tracking the number of fact sheets that have been downloaded in the gold part of that graph there. So there's around 33,000 fact sheets a year which are downloaded by different people. And you can see in recent years, since 2016, we've put a lot of effort into partnering with Overseer and delivering the information directly into Overseer, so people are not having to go to ESMAP and copy it all down by hand as such. If we look at the type of people that are downloading those fact sheets, around 60% of them are either the agri-surface sector or landowners themselves, but you can see there's actually a much wider spectrum of people, and it's growing all the time. The education market, for example, is something that's increased in recent years, and so we're looking at how can we better shape products to meet their needs. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so that sums up the first part of the section, which Linda did a great job of stepping in whilst I sorted out my sound there. But the key thing to remember is that the soil information is important for a wide range of issues, and Linda will show a couple of those in a second. But what we've found is where we do get ESMAP coverage and we make it available straight away, it's used by a wide range of people. So I'll hand over to Linda.
Yes, I'll talk about that sort of middle layer, if you like, of the inference engine. And soil knowledge is held in all sorts of different shapes and forms, and we capture all of that within that inference engine. So, for example, you might have measurements of data, you might have that expert knowledge sort of in people's heads, the data and the information that's buried away in legacy reports. We have rule-based models where we've interpreted that sort of expert understanding into a whole set of rules, mathematical models of classical statistics, but also the new machine learning type techniques, and then also physical equations. All of that knowledge gets captured within the inference engine. And that's what gives the real power to ESMAP, because it means that any updates to that base level of data feed immediately straight up to the users without any particular effort on our part. It's automatically processed. It also means that that knowledge is really easily updated. So if we do an experiment or find out a bit more or get some new data, it just propagates up through that inference engine, and we're easily able to incorporate that new knowledge. And then the final real advantage is that everything's documented. It's not like the SOAR databases of old where you've lost the knowledge of why a person assessed something as being in a particular way. It's all buried within the inference engine. And that's resulting in a really flexible, a dynamic soil information system that can provide that consistent information that we need at the catchment and the regional scale. So let's look at some of those soil properties and the predictions that we make. This is in the soil water information part of it. And there are lots of processes all there in the white boxes that control where the water moves within the landscape. And soil properties drive a lot of that. And one of the really big ones is storage. So that's the amount of water that's held in the soil and is therefore available to plants. And there are a number of soil properties that control that. And so we make predictions of those, and that is really useful for things like irrigation and effluent design, and also the operation of those the irrigation and effluent systems. Again, those key soil properties feed into Overseer, as we've already mentioned, and that is essential for then predicting nutrient losses and greenhouse gases. Different soil properties feed into the catchment hydrological models like the New Zealand water model, which NIWA has, and so that's then predicting where the water is moving on the catchment scale into the rivers and lakes. Another application that uses all this information is the New Zealand Drought Index, and we're working on this right at the moment. Currently, the Drought Index on the NIWA website doesn't have soil in it. It just has a constant soil. And what we're working on with NIWA is importing our data into that model so that it starts making predictions on the droughtiness that takes into account the soil. And we did a project last year where we looked at the difference of when you did and didn't include the soil. And the one on the right is where you just have a constant soil. And the one on the left is where you bring in that soil-specific information about the storage capacity of the soil. And you can see that they look quite different. But even if you take that 100 metre and coarsen it up to 5 kilometre so that it's compatible with the climate grid, you still see when you use that aggregated soil information versus using a constant soil, you get differences of 1 to 2 million hectares in droughtiness, so either an underestimate or an overestimate of 1 to 2 million at key times of the year. So that soil information really is quite important. We've got our various other models. These are sort of more expert-driven, rule-based type models where we predict using the various sort of soil properties as to whether we think the land is likely to leach in or leach phosphorus, or bypass flow where it sort of goes down through the cracks. The macropores, these are all the different vulnerabilities of the land according to these different pathways of contaminants moving. Again, we talked about overseer. Another use is we feed that soil information into overseer under different land use scenarios. And in that way, you can get to an estimate of what the total load in a whole catchment, this is the Selwyn Te Waihora catchment, in their limit setting process. So we ran various scenarios using that data to then understand what the impact would be on the lake, and therefore they came up with a limit setting plan by which they limited the nutrients. But the soil information was underpinning all of this work. Different application yet again. This is at the moment the government is thinking about the highly productive land, and their default characterisation of it will be the land use capability classes 1 to 3. Now, just sort of a component of that is what we call the highly versatile land, which is where the soil can be used for lots of different purposes. And that's really that LUC class 1 and 2. So just focusing on those two classes, this is an analysis where we've looked at what the LUC, the national LUC class is, which is based on quite coarse scale soil mapping from the 1970s and 80s. And then we've redone the exercise, but using SMAP. And you can see the difference there. The green is where they both agree. It is land use classes 1 and 2. The yellow is where SMAP only says that it's classes 1 and 2. And the pink is where the LRI says it's classes 1 or 2, but SMAP disagrees. And you can see some numbers there. There's quite a big difference. This is Canterbury, sort of that 286,000 difference, 150,000 odd hectares. And there are the numbers and differences, but the easy way to think about it is that 3/4 of the area that the LRI, LUC 1 and 2, it was identified, was not identified. There was a disagreement when it was done by SMAP. And the other way around, half of where SMAP said that it was classes 1 and 2 was not identified by the LRI. So that's pretty significant differences between the two different soil inputs feeding into that land use class characterisation. Just looking at that in a slightly more detail, why is it? So there's a detail of the map. Those two areas there are where the LRI had said that it was a stony soil. But at SMAP, with our more accurate mapping, it is in fact a moderately deep soil, and it does categorise out as classes 1 and 2. This is the other way around. The LRI said that it was a good soil, a moderately deep, but in fact it's a stony soil in SMAP. And slightly different up there, this is where the LRI said that it was a moderately well drained, whereas in SMAP it's a poorly and very poorly drained soil, and it doesn't classify as class 1 and 2. So that's the reason for the differences. It's that underlying soil information. So the key take-home message here is that there's lots of science that's underpinning transforming that soil information into all of that, the products and the information that people need for their various different needs, requirements. But you need to have good quality soil information feeding into that. Otherwise, you're going to end up with expensive mistakes and missed opportunities. And just in the final slide, we haven't talked much about that lower layer of the information system, and that's because we've got some developments happening there. We've got increased coverage in August of an extra 350,000 hectares. We have a new pedotransfer function model for the soil water predictions. Again, we hope to release that in August. Another piece of work that we've been working on is the SMAP farm test, and this is where we can take samples on land, take a core and scan it, and then make the predictions of the different soil properties, and indeed feed that information from that scanned core into Overseer by accessing the SMAP Inference engine. So we see it as a way of enabling consultants to use the SMAP science, but down at the farm scale. we'd love to tell you about these updates. And so we've booked ourselves a slot for the 21st of July. We hope that for a similar webinar like this one, we hope you can join us. But meanwhile, we hope that our introduction to SMAP has been useful for you, and thank you for your time and listening. Hand you back to Christine.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Sam and Linda, and thanks for everyone for persisting through our little technical glitch there. We have got some questions coming in. First of all, as a Northlander, a question close to my heart. Kirire Hana had noticed that there's very little information in SMAP for Northland. So what does it take to get that baseline information, and how can we populate that area?
Yeah, so it's
Sam.
actually a great question. We're currently are working with MPI and Northland Regional Council, and together with some of the other local authorities up there, to try to get a similar to a top climate project, actually, again, a regional kind of employment initiative underway to try to survey the soils in SMAP, but also collect wider information, particularly sediment and sediment movement in Northland is quite a key issue up there. So at the same time as doing the soil survey, we would also like to collect that information and feed through to support the farm environment plans there. So yeah, we're hoping to get something underway in Northland pretty soon.
Sort of a related question has come in from Andrew Fenimore, and he's asking how much of the historic legacy maps do we have in SMAP, and is there more scope to incorporate some of that information?
Yeah, okay, I suppose I can cover that too. We've pretty much cleaned the cupboard on that one, and that most of the legacy maps are in SMAP. Some of that 350,000 hectares, which Linda mentioned just before, that are uploaded by August, is the last of the legacy maps. There's a few areas or number left around the Manawatu and also Taranaki, and so we're starting to put some of those in at the moment, but we've pretty much have captured all of the legacy information that does exist up to now. So yeah, from here on in, it's really actually having to map areas that don't have legacy information at the scale that people require nowadays.
Thanks, Sam. Now, Deborah Burgess has got a quick question. Might not be such a quick one. She's asking if we include Class 3 in the LRI and SMAP comparison, do you see the same disparity between the two data sets? I'm not sure if we've done that, Linda.
We have looked a bit at that. We can only do it for Canterbury at the moment, but yes, there is equally disparity there, because then it becomes between classes 3 and 4, whether they are all in, and there'll be differences between the way that SMAP does that and the LRI.
Great. One other question. We've probably got time for one or two more. Can we screen to show locations with specific soil properties? For instance, and David Whitehead wants to know this, and you'll understand why, can we identify where there are soils with a carbon concentration of greater than 3%?
Right, okay, so carbon is a tricky one, because carbon is so dependent on land use. And that is one of the pieces of work that we want to do in the coming year, is to get to link carbon with SMAP. But the more general question around whether we can identify soils with certain ranges of properties, yes, of course we can do that. It's not something that you can do currently on SMAP online, but you can certainly do it within a GIS context. If you access the data layers and bring them down, you could do whatever kind of query you wish to on whichever properties you'd like to.
Great. And one last question. Molly Elton is asking, for councils now making decisions following the NPS FM and regional plan changes, how important is getting regions SMAP'd to provide accurate data for soil nutrient leaching capability and the influence on groundwater and surface water?
Absolutely essential. We could not have done that. All of the nutrient leaching type work that I've been involved with, mostly with Canterbury, with some other councils as well, you simply can't do it reliably without SMAP.
And that segues quite nicely into what I think will have to be our last question. I see our time is ticking along. Richard Gordon is asking, should people rely more on ESMAP or the LRI?
Oh, okay, so there are two different data sets. We need to remember that ESMAP focuses on the soil, whereas the LRI just has 5 different properties about the erosion, the land cover, and it's not in the rock type, it's not just the soil. So for some cases, you will need to use the LRI because it covers a concept that is not covered in ESMAP. But if you're looking at the soil, then you should really be using ESMAP.
Great. Look, I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone for coming along and joining us today. We will publish some of the additional questions and their answers online, and I'm sure you're all already making a note of that date for the follow-up seminar with Linda and Sam. We do have another LINKOnline seminar webinar next week. Alison Greenaway will be talking about her ecosystem-based management program and resources to foster conversations around holistic governance. So another big topic, another introduction to an important part of the work that we do here at Manaaki Whenua, and I know will be really relevant to lots of people. We will send out the invitations for that this afternoon and look forward to seeing you again next week or next month. Thanks very much. Bye for now.